Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And for your weekly top 5 video this week, we are going over the top 5 ships that broke the game. By that, I mean these ships were released, they were a little bit too much for the game, and they either had to be pulled and nerfed and then reintroduced to the game, or they caused some big global nerfs to happen in the game, or they had to be nerfed several times just to be in a more balanced state. So that is the context for this video. But before we get going into this video, if you are interested in firearms and wondering what is and isn't capable of stopping a bullet, we did more of that this weekend by trying to find out if Stanley Cups can stop armor-piercing rounds, which the results were pretty interesting of that. But if you're interested in that, go check out yesterday's video. For those that don't care, onto the list. So coming in at number 5, we have the Tier 9 Premium American Destroyer, the Black. Now, the Black is a ship that is currently available. She is a fairly expensive coal ship, but if you can pick her up, I would highly recommend you pick her up because she's a very, very good ship. And this is the nerfed version of the Black. So you see, what makes the Black so different from all the other Fletchers in the game, because I think we have like, what, 7, 8, 9 Fletchers in the game now, is that she gets what every single destroyer player would love to have, and that is her own personal radar. You see, if you aren't aware, destroyers are ships that are primarily the target of many a radar, because cruisers will sit outside of caps, wait for destroyers to go into the caps, radar them, so now they're exposed to the world, and then of course the idea is that the team will dogpile the destroyer to death, and then there you go. So, of course, with many destroyer getting radar to death, it was probably quite some relief to finally be the one doing the radaring when the Black was first released, all the way back in update 6.1, fellas. This ship was released in 6.1. We're about to get to 13.8. That is quite some time ago. So imagine, if you will, the Warships of, what, 7 years ago, a radar destroyer with its own smokescreen, and that's still a Fletcher, that still has a Fletcher DPM on the guns. The only real trade-off is that you get slower torpedoes in exchange for the radar. You get that in this game 7 years ago. That is absolutely insane. And keep in mind, too, this is before the 6-second delay when it comes to radar. If you guys don't know, when you radar somebody, for 6 seconds only you can spot that target. And then after that 6 seconds is up, then the rest of the team can spot that target. So for like Soviet ships with their 12-second radar, only for, really half of your radar's time are you really spotting that ship for everyone to dogpile. American ships is a little bit different because they have a much longer duration radar, right? But this is before that was a thing. So the Fletcher could go to a cap, find a destroyer that was sitting in smoke, radar it, and then from within its own smoke screen, farm down that destroyer while everyone gets to dogpile that same destroyer the second that radar goes off. So needless to say, the ship was a little overpowered because of that, and she was pulled. And we did not see the Black return to the game until update 11.4. And after it had already been nerfed by receiving a 3-second nerf to its radar, keep in mind too, 11.4 is a much different game than 6.1. We've had more radar ships, we've had more, well, of everything at that point in the game, right? So while the Black was an absolutely insane thing to have on your account back in 6.1, by the time we got to 11.4, and again, it received the radar nerfs, and now we have the 6-second radar detection delay. It's in a much more balanced state nowadays, but it's still a hilarious ship to go into the game and radar, primarily for Shermans that just love sitting in their smoke screens and farming everyone down and turning the tables on them. But yes, a ship that was so busted we didn't get to have any access to it for, again, 5-6 years until it was reintroduced last year. So yes, again, a ship I would, again, encourage you guys to pick up because it's just a good ship either way in today's World of Warships in a much more balanced state than it was back in the day. So going down to number 4, we have the Tier 8 Premium Soviet Cruiser, the Kutuzov. The Kutuzov, man, this thing before, and it may not have been the sole cause of the smoke firing penalty changes, and on top of that, the stealth firing penalty changes. Yeah, so this is a little bit before my time. That's how old this ship is as well. Kutuzov is a Soviet light cruiser that has a 19-kilometer range on its main battery guns. And it has Soviet shell ballistics, which means it doesn't really care that it's firing at 19 kilometers. It's quite comfortable to shoot at those ranges. So, again, this is before my time in World of Warships. I think these changes happened like a patch or two before I joined the game. Detection and your penalty to your detection didn't really work like it does in today's World of Warships. You were able to stealth fire back in the day if you had a long enough range with a certain caliber of gun, I do believe, and then the smoke firing penalties, I believe, were much smaller than they were than they are, I should say, in today's World of Warships. So this is a ship that could stay undetected and just farm the ever-loving crap out of battleships. Now keep in mind too, this is a Tier 8 cruiser with a 19-kilometer range on its main battery guns. That is greater than quite a few Tier 8 battleships have for their main battery gun range. So you could be getting farmed down by this guy and not even see him. And that is just beyond annoying in my mind, and I'm certainly glad that that is a big change that I believe was received pretty positively by most of the community. So, yeah. This ship is one of the harder ones to get today. I think you can still get it in the Santa containers and such. But even after all of those changes that, do very much nerf what the ship was all about, it's still a really good ship because you still get a smokescreen, you still get the 19-kilometer range, and you still get the Soviet shell ballistics. So you can and will farm down plenty of ships with the Kutuzov in today's World of Warships. This is a ship they've tried to bring back in a number of ways. There's a Pan-Asian version of the ship, and we just got, I believe, an AP-only version of the ship as well. So, and there's one or two more, I think, that have, various different qualities changed about the ship, like the Lazo, I believe that's the Pan-Asian one. It's a deep water torpedo variant with, I believe, a shorter main battery gun range and such. But it is still a scarily good ship in today's World of Warships, but yes, one that was, I don't know how they thought, okay, this thing has a 19-kilometer main battery gun range with all these mechanics to where it can literally sit in the back and just farm ships out without even having to worry about getting spotted ever. Yeah, that's a little bit too much, and I'm glad it did get nerfed. So, going on our way down now to number 3, we have a much more familiar face for some of you newer players out there, and that is the Tier 10 Techline Soviet Heavy Cruiser, the Petropavlosk. That's right, 2 Soviet ships back-to-back, fellas. So Petropavlosk, I don't think the ship needs too much of an introduction, but man, this is a ship that just wouldn't die back when it was first released. As I'm sure many of you are aware, and if you're not aware, take a look at this ship. It sits pretty low in the water right now, does it not? Well, you're not going to believe this, newer player. This is after Wargaming raised it out of the water. Twice! That's right, this ship used to be pretty much at sea level, its rear deck at least, and I do believe back in the day, you can go look on either my channel or somebody else's channel, find some old Petropavlovsk footage. It wasn't uncommon for just like the idle wave animations to clip through the back of the Petropavlovsk stern deck because that's how low it was in the water. And if you don't know, having a lower freeboard in this game is a pretty nice thing to have. Because, well, that's that much less real estate that your shells have to hit the target. Because if the target's thinner, I mean, less of it's there. It's like the exact opposite of the Vermont, where you have just like 4 acres of side to shoot, So it's sat so low in the water that you could pretty much forget about pinning it reliably, let alone citadeling it from the side. And if you also take a look at the general shape of the ship, especially from the bow end, it's a really thin cruiser that way as well. So that means the Petropavlovsk player could just sit bow into you on an island or really just in the open water because, again, of how low in the water it sat, and really not care. Like, yeah, you might pin it with like every 4th or 5th shell, talking from like a battleship player perspective, but when you do pin it, it does pretty negligible amount of damage, and it still has the bow, icebreaker bow that a lot of Soviet ships have, so it would just bounce or shatter a lot of shells. You might pin it every now and then, but it would just take an eternity to try and whittle one of these things down to death, and it still had a pretty healthy amount of HP as well. And on top of that, the guns they used to be a bit more accurate, but they hurt a lot because Soviet shell ballistics. Soviet shells, if you guys don't know, they have a better air drag coefficient, which means that they carry their penetrating power at much further ranges than other cruiser guns normally do. So that means at ranges it can still chunk the ever-living crap out of you, and it still can today after the accuracy nerf still. If it hits the right part of your battleship, this is a ship that can still Citadel tier 10 battleships from like 14-15 kilometers out because of the shell ballistics. And of course you have the legendary mod now that's completely something else. That's a whole video's worth of a discussion right there. But again, thankfully it did get nerfed several times back to back to back. Took them a while to finally get around to nerfing it, but thankfully they did. I mean, the thing was getting restricted in clan battles all the time, was getting banned in COTS and other tournaments all the time as well because of how freaking strong it was. Oh, and it still got like the Soviet radar, hydroacoustic search, all these goodies that made this ship just straight out the gate pick for competitive. It still is a pretty popular pick for competitive nowadays, but not as much as it used to be. I mean, when the ship was basically impossible to punish, yeah, no doubt it's gonna be popular and competitive. But again, thankfully it has been nerfed, and hopefully it will stay this way for quite some time. Alright, on the way down now to number 2, we have a ship that has probably haunted many a player's dreams, and is probably quite a few players' sleep paralysis demon. And that is the tier 10 American submarine, the Gato, however you say this ship's name. So, yeah, this submarine, I'm pretty sure this is a fair amount of the, a fair amount of the blame for the torpedo changes to submarines probably rests with, like, this ship and maybe, like, one or two others. So, the Gato was completely designed around at least it seems, from what I've seen, and from many players believe as well, around the idea of shotgunning. If you don't know what shotgunning is, then you have had a very lovely time in World of Warships. Shotgunning was this maneuver you used to be able to do back around the first introduction of submarines, where you could pop up like a kilometer away from, well, really not a kilometer, like 2.1 kilometers away from an enemy ship, dump all of your torpedoes just outside of your assured detection range into the side of the enemy ship, blow them out the water, and just slip away into the night laughing because you were undetected that entire time. So Gato is great for this because you essentially have a rack of gearing torpedoes in your bow, which has 17k alpha damage, and then you have the a absolutely high number of torpedoes in the bow for a submarine, and you still have 4 more in the stern as well. Granted, you only get to reload half of your torpedo tubes at one time, but even half of these torpedoes, it's more than capable of dealing with most tier 10 ships in one go. On top of that as well, the way that the submarine mechanics work, you can sit at periscope depth and still enjoy your full top speed, and the Gato on the surface is quite a fast ship. If you have the right build for it, when you're low on battery, you can actually go 40 knots in the Gato on the surface, which is ridiculous, and you get to enjoy that speed at periscope depth. So, go to periscope depth, walk up to the enemy ship that's not, expecting you to be there, dump torpedoes into their side from within 3 kilometers, and sail away before anybody even knows you're there. The only thing to indicate that you were there would be the ship blowing up in the water. So, yeah. Now, again, is it all the Gato's fault? Probably not, but again, this thing was the king of shotgunning when shotgunning was still a thing. And now we have the mechanic in game to where if you fire your torpedoes at a target that's within 3 kilometers of you, the torpedoes do a menial amount of damage. We're talking about like 1 or 2%, or I think it starts at like 1% and you can go up to 10% of the torpedo's maximum damage. So again, a completely negligible amount of damage to the enemy ships, thereby essentially killing shotgunning as we once knew it. Now it's just a really stealthy gearing that can go underwater for, what's the underwater time, like 4 minutes at a time now. Still a pretty strong submarine, but again, help bring about these changes to the submarine's torpedoes. Alright, and going on down to number 1, we have a ship that, was so incredibly busted back in the day, and that even after the rework that was intended to fix it, still had to be nerfed and subsequently removed from the game. And that is the Tier 8 Premium American Aircraft Carrier, the Enterprise. So the Enterprise, man, this ship back in the RTS days was just a bully. This is a Tier 8 aircraft carrier that could absolutely nuke Tier 10 ships without a care in the world. And then even after the CV rework, it was still really friggin' strong. So strong that they removed it from the game. It was briefly available right after the rework. Man, and I picked one up before the rework because it was so good, and I didn't know how to do CVs, but I wanted to learn, and obviously after being murdered by it so much, it's one that I did pick up. But man, Enterprise, you know, the Enterprise that we have today is very much not the one that was, you know, present before the CV rework or even after the CV rework. It's been nerfed to hell. The only thing that's really special about it today is that you probably won't run out of planes if you're even half decent with balancing, you know, your squadron usage. I mean, I'm a terrible CV player, and I can get this thing to work nowadays just because, again, I tend to not run out of planes. But yeah, no, like back before the CV rework, you could, with this thing's AP bombs, just nuke ships off the map, and then you could cross-drop them with your torpedoes as well. So they're definitely dying if you knew what you were doing. Post-CV rework, the rockets on this thing were absolutely crazy. They had an incredibly tight circle, a tighter aiming circle than what you're seeing on screen right now. And there was no firing delay back in the day, so you could absolutely bully the ever-living crap out of destroyers with the Enterprise's HE rockets. And then, of course, you still have the AP bombs on top of that as well, to where you could just remove cruisers from the match before they could even say anything in any direction as to their survivability. Just delete them from the match. Who cares now? And the torpedoes actually haven't really changed all that much. They've always been kind of slow and just consistent damage dealers through and through, but the rockets got changed. We had the firing delay to the rockets. They've nerfed the reticle once. The AP bombs have been absolutely nerfed into the dirt. They still do hurt if they all hit, but they've messed with the reticle, causing the bombs to fall more to the outside of the reticle. They've nerfed the damage from the bombs. I think they've even increased the fall time for the bombs at one point in time. But lots of changes have come to the Enterprise in the forms of global and direct nerfs. And again, she's was one of the most oppressive CVs back in the day, so you have her to thank for these changes, along with like the Kaga and old Graf Zeppelin before they nerfed. Well, actually, they changed that one entirely before it was released. So, guys, those are my top 5 ships that broke the game. Let me know in the comments down below, what ships would you add to this list, what ships would you remove from this list, what ships did I forget, so forth and so on. Hope you guys have a wonderful Monday, wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.